Chair Coles, Chancellor Malhotra, members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Priscilla, and I'm the Vice President of Lead MN. Damar Clack, Philando Castile, Judge Floyd. The last 2 weeks have been characterized by righteous unrest. Racism continues to plague our state and our country, impacting our already vulnerable communities. Earlier in the year, we as a society had to confront and address ongoing anti-Asian sentiments that were exacerbated by COVID-19. And now, just a few short weeks ago, the world watched in horror the video of Judge Floyd being murdered by a Minneapolis police officer. This brutal act and the events that followed it did not take place in some far-off city or state. This was in our own community, in our backyard, and just 3 miles from one of our colleges. His death and the way it was handled hit me in multiple ways, as it did for many other Black people who took to the streets to protest. I could go into the many ways America continues to undermine Black lives, but I would take more than the few minutes I have. I will focus on the role the state has played going forward. Another incidents happen again. It eliminates some of the racial disparities in the country. According to the personal release, 4 officers in the attended a Minnesota State college. 3 of the 4 officers were enrolled in law enforcement programs at a Minnesota State college at some point. This should not come as a surprise. Our system trains a significant number of our state law enforcement members before they become licensed police officers. But I raise a question to you. Did Minnesota State do enough to prepare these officers to interact with and protect the communities they would be serving? Minnesota State has its work cut out in addressing massive achievement gaps, systematic racism, and now responding to ensure our law enforcement programs are training officers who can handle the ever-growing diversity of our communities and states. But just as Equity 2030 has been tasked with addressing systemic and structural racism in higher education, the system has to start thinking of our law enforcement programs and how they're educating our students and serving our communities. On June 5th, the Lead MN Governing Council approved a resolution requesting that Minnesota State convene a statewide working group of students, faculty, and community members to review its law enforcement programs on things like training on systemic racism, cultural awareness, equity issues, and service to the community in the curriculum, student recruitment and diversity, faculty recruitment and diversity, and post-graduation employment and policing outcomes. We believe that through engagement with all Minnesota State stakeholders and the community, we can build law enforcement programs that are a model for the rest of the nation. I implore you all to take this issue seriously. In the past, we haven't had much success with conversations like this, due to the fact that the system believes it's doing all it can to address racial inequality, when in fact we're not doing half as much as we can. We do not need to have national attention on our state before we start discussing ways to improve our law enforcement programs. Systematic racism did not start with the death of Judge Floyd within Minnesota State system. It should not take the murder for us to start to take this seriously and to start talking about racism, especially incidents called out by students. Response and actions could have and should have been taken when we first called out microaggressions students have experienced. Our students have long noted the silence by Minnesota State and Board of Trustees. In fact, just a couple years ago, our students wore tape across their mouth at a BOT meeting to symbolize how long students have been silenced in our attempts to speak out against the racism they experience within Minnesota State. If Minnesota State is truly committed to creating an equitable and inclusive environment for all students to be educated, then there needs to be an internal assessment to address and correct the racism that already exists inside the environment. This includes policies, procedures, expectations, and curriculum. As the largest post-secondary education provider in the state of Minnesota and the primary educator of our state law enforcement, Minnesota State has a responsibility to the people of this state to take a hard look at the education and training we are providing, and to ensure that our law enforcement are properly prepared to serve the communities of color we are training them to protect. We cannot bring back George Floyd or the many others that have lost their lives to this senseless violence, but we can start to move forward by creating change within our education system. To be silent now and wait for others to take action on these issues when you have the power to make real change will only guarantee that more lives will be lost and that these issues will continue for generations to come. Thank you.